Okay, welcome back to another video on one of the Hack the Box machines. This is going to be a walkthrough of this forest machine here. And this is actually going to be a little bit different to some of my previous Hack the Box videos because in this one, the two main things that are going to be used to get the user flag and the root flag, I've actually already done videos explaining those techniques in detail. So we're going to run through everything on this box, but there's going to be some points where I'm pretty much just going to say refer to the other videos because there's no point me just repeating myself and explaining the same things that I've already explained in other videos in a lot more detail and a lot more depth. So yeah, there might not be that much to this video, but we'll run through it and see what happens. So the first thing we're going to do, as always, is an nmap scan, and the IP that we're going to scan is that one, 10.10.161, and I'm just going to do the first 6,000 ports. That's kind of my standard default start. We'll do T4 to make it slightly faster and -V for the verbose output, and we will let that run, and I will resume this video when that's finished. Alright, now that that's finished, let's have a look at the ports we've got here. We've got 53, which is DNS. Don't know why it doesn't just say DNS there instead of domain. 88 Kerberos, 135 RPC, 389 LDAP. So DNS and LDAP, generally if those two ports are open on the same machine, it's probably a domain controller for Active Directory. So 445 SMB shares. Again, like secure LDAP, global catalog LDAP, and the secure version of that. More kind of confirmation that this is a domain controller. And then port 5985 for remote PowerShell access, or WinRM, as people call it. So, what have we got to work with? I think the first thing we'll look at is LDAP. So let's just use LDP, built-in Microsoft tool. We'll run that and see if we can connect and see anything. So we'll go to connect. We'll put in the IP address that we're attacking and see what we get. Okay, so we get a load of information. You can kind of ignore all this complicated stuff down here. The main thing that we're interested in is DNS hostname here. So we know that the hostname of this server is forest, and it's a member of this htb.local domain. So that's some useful information to start with. We know that the domain name is htb.local. You can kind of pick that out in various other places here as well. You've got the domain name, and then DC equals HTTP, DC equals local. That's kind of the LDAP distinguished name format for a domain name. And if none of that means anything to you, I would suggest going and watching my Active Directory Basics video, because that will cover this kind of stuff. So we know that that's the domain name. Can we actually browse and find anything in here? Let's have a look. We'll put the root of the domain as our starting point. And we'll just say search for any user accounts and bring back, let's just say the username, which is some account name attribute. So we can actually search here. So anonymous access is allowed, which is good for LDAP. What do we find? We've got the computer account for this machine. We've also got an Exchange server account, it looks like. And a load of Exchange mailbox stuff. More Exchange stuff. Few user accounts here. If we actually search and just do star here, we'll get all of the attributes for each user. So we can look through all this and see if there's any information in here that's useful to us. Obviously I'm not going to go through everything now because I've already done this before, but long story short, there wasn't anything particularly useful in here. Now you will also see some fairly weirdly named user accounts, like this dude one, this Frodo2 one. They weren't there the first time I did this, and that's because on this machine we do actually have permission to create new user accounts, and we do need to use that at one point. So it's kind of confusing when you first attack this machine because you'll see loads of weird user accounts and you might think, oh, that's the one that I've got to attack because of something that you see in here, like this is a member of the Exchange Windows Permissions group and all these other important groups, so maybe that's the one that I need to attack. But yeah, that account shouldn't be there. It's only there because somebody else is attacking this machine at the moment and they needed to create it. So a little bit weird in terms of attacking, but I guess that's just one of those things. So after poking around and looking at some other stuff and not really getting anywhere, I decided to run the in-packet scripts. So we start with the get np users script, which again I've got a video on. We'll do htb.local, and if you just do a slash, it will search the entire domain. You don't actually have to put a username despite what the help text says. So we'll do that. We'll do the DC IP address of 10.10.161 because that's the server that we're attacking, and we can just run it like that and see if we find anything. And we do. We get a hit on this SVC alfresco account. So this account doesn't have Kerberos pre-authentication enabled. And again, I don't want to just repeat everything I've said in a lot of detail in other videos, so I'd really suggest you go and watch my video on this get np user script and Kerberos pre-authentication, because that explains in a lot of detail why this script works and why it does what it does. But for this video, because I don't want to repeat myself, we'll just skip straight to doing dash request, and then we'll get this essentially password hash. It's not technically a password hash, but we'll get this information here that we can crack and get a password from. So we crack that with hashcat. So let's go to where I've got hashcat stored. And I've just remembered that hashcat doesn't seem to work on a VM, so I'm going to do it on my main machine here. And if we just do hashcat.exe, and then the mode I think is 18200 if I remember rightly. Again, this is all covered in the get NP users video. And then we want to paste in the hash thing that we got. And then we're just going to do rocku.text. So there we go, that's finished. And we got the password, which is just service with a 3. So we'll grab that. Now we know the username is that, and the password is service. So let's try and log in with PowerShell. So to connect with PowerShell remotely, we just do enter PS session. And the reason we're doing this is because we saw this port here is open. So as soon as we get some credentials, the first thing to try is see if we can log in with PowerShell. So we'll do credential, and we'll say svc alfresco, and then it'll prompt us to enter the password in a minute. For some reason, this VM is running really slowly. I think it's doing a Windows update. So yeah, there we go. We'll paste in that service password that we just got, and it should let us in. There we go, we're in. So we can do ls. If you didn't know, ls is like an alias for the get child items or get child item command. So you see you get the exact same output there. ls is just an alias just to make people feel more at home. You can also do dir. The exact same stuff ends up getting run. And as usual, as you can see, people are not particularly thoughtful when they attack these machines, and they just dump a load of stuff in the first place they land. So there's all this stuff that should not be here, which gives somebody else potentially a bit of a leg up when they first get here. But yeah, people are very inconsiderate. So we'll kind of just skip to the bit that we're supposed to do, which is look at the desktop of this alfresco account. dir there, and again, someone's dumped Mimikatz there. But yeah, we can get the user.text flag from here. So you can do gc, which stands for get content, user.text, and we can read the user flag. So that's how you get the user flag. Again, I feel bad because I've kind of just skipped through this and just gone, oh, just run this command and then boom, it works. But like I keep saying, I have done a video explaining that in a lot of detail, and I would highly encourage you to go and watch that, because it's not good to get into the habit of just run a script, have no idea how it works or why you run it or anything, and then it just gives you a thing that you can get a password from. Much better to understand how it works and why it works and when you should use it. So definitely go and watch the video on that. So now that we're in here logged on as this user account, obviously the first time I did this I had a good look around, see what's in the C drive and everything. Cool, somebody has created a folder that's not supposed to be there with a lovely name. But yeah, had a look around, couldn't find anything of use in here. Looked through the registry as well with like reg query. You can do reg query and query registry keys. Had a look at everything I could find there, didn't find anything. So I started to look at Active Directory. And if we look at the Active Directory permissions in particular, if we use ds-acls, and we'll just look at the root, so dc equals htb, dc equals local, I might have to put that in there. And ds-acls is just a built-in Windows command that looks at Active Directory permissions. You just supply the distinguished name of the object you want to look at. In this case, we'll do the root, and we'll see what we get. So we end up with this long list of permissions. There's a lot of permissions on the root of the domain. And you could look through here and try and figure out exactly what's going on. But I'll be honest, the first time I attacked this box, I just used AD Permissions Reporter, just the free edition of this, which we can run remotely. Now this is not like an exploit tool or anything like that. This is a legit tool that Windows admins would use. And to do that, we need to set our DNS server to point to, in fact I've already got it open here, to point to the remote machine. So we'll just set that quickly in here. So it's 10.10, oops, 10.10.10.161. And now we'll have name resolution working properly. So if we put htb.local in there, and we'll set the credentials to be this svc alfresco account. And it was service with the 3, if I remember rightly. I've just realized one thing that I did wrong there, was I set the DNS server on my local network connection here, whereas it actually needs to be set on the VPN. So we're going to edit my config and I'll set that in there. And to do that, you just edit your config file, stick this in there, and set the IP of the machine that you want to use as your DNS server. So we'll do that, close that. Right, so we've reconnected back to the VPN, and now this should work. Yeah, so you see now it's found the domain controller, so DNS resolution is working. Now this will take quite a while for it to get all of the information from this first node, because after that it caches everything, but this first layer that it's going to try and get everything from the root of the domain, it will take a while because it's got to look up all of those names and everything that we saw here. There's actually quite a lot that goes on. I've done it already, it wasn't too bad. But yeah, sometimes it takes ages. We can actually cancel this now because we're only interested in the permissions on the root of the domain. So what have we got going on here? If we look down this list, we will see somewhere that the Exchange Trusted Subsystem and Exchange Windows Permissions groups have got permission to modify permissions. You can see here we've got modify permissions, and the important thing here is that the apply to option is set to this object and a certain type of child object. You'll see on some of these other permission entries that like the Exchange Trusted Subsystem group has permission to modify permissions as well, but that's only applying to certain type of child objects, so it doesn't affect this root level here on the domain. And that's important for us because we want to be able to modify permissions on this root level. Again, I'm going to refer you to another video that I did on the DC sync attacks, because that's basically what we're going to be doing here. But there's just one little extra step in between here. So yeah, what we're looking for is the ability to modify permissions on this root domain so that we can grant ourselves permission to do these, replicating directory changes and replicating directory changes all. They're the two permissions that we need to be able to do a DC sync attack. So this Exchange Windows Permissions group has those permissions. Well, sorry, it doesn't have those permissions, it has permission to modify permissions, which means we can then grant ourselves the permissions we want. And again, that's only because this option is set to this object. None of the other permissions are set like that, and it's pretty much a bug that Microsoft don't want to fix for some reason. But yeah, so we just need to find a way to get ourselves into that group. So if we, actually I should have let that carry on, because if we do that again, we can have a look at the permissions on that group and see if there's any way that we can modify the membership of that group. Alright, so that is finished now, and we can take a look at the group that we were interested in. Presumably it's going to be in this Exchange Security Groups folder. So there it is, Exchange Windows Permissions. So if we look at the permissions on that, we can see this account operators group has got full control. And it just so happens that our account that we're running as, if we do whoami/all, in fact that's kind of the first thing I normally do when I get onto a box, is just run that and see what groups the user account that I'm using is actually a member of. And basically if we look in here, we can see that our user account is actually a member of the account operators group. So we've essentially got permission to do whatever we want to this group, which means we can add group members to it. So that's great. We could just add our SVC alfresco account to that group. But as I mentioned before, people generally aren't very considerate on these hack the box machines of the fact that other people are attacking them at the same time. And if we just added this user account that we're using now, if we just added them to that group, then now everyone else who attacks this box after us is going to also get those SVC alfresco credentials. They're going to get to this point, but now they're going to be a member of a group they shouldn't be a member of. They're going to have extra permissions that they shouldn't have. So we don't really want to do anything that's going to affect other people. I think there is actually also something on this machine that prevents you from using the SVC alfresco account to actually do a DC sync attack. I think the group membership gets automatically reset every now and then or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is, because it was a few months ago that I did this, but I have seen a lot of people saying that they couldn't actually do it with the SVC alfresco account. Personally, I didn't even try because, like I said, it's very inconsiderate to modify permissions for an account that everyone is using. But yeah, having said all that, let's create ourselves a new user account, and then we don't have to mess about with this one that we're using. So if we do import module Active Directory, again remember that this is all running on the remote machine, and we know it's a domain controller, so it'll have this Active Directory module. And now we can do new AD user, and I can't remember the exact syntax, but I think SAM account name. Yep, SAM account name for the username. We'll just call it VB Scrub, and I can't remember what else we need to do. Let's try that and just see if that works. Oh, it wants a name, so we'll just call it VB Scrub. I forgot it prompts you for certain parameters. So we should be able to do get AD user VB Scrub, oops, and see their properties. We do also need to do a password for that account, don't we? So let's do set AD user VB Scrub password, is it? No, password never expires, password never required, no. Let's remove that account actually, and we'll set the password. Yes, we want to remove that account. We'll set the password in this part here. So can we do password, please? No, you can't do it there. Right, so now I'm going to have to Google how this commandlet works, because That's life. Please just give me an example. Don't want a certificate. Don't want any of that stuff. I just want to set the password. Why is that not like the default, most common thing that you would want to do when you create a user account? Okay, it's account password. So we're just going to copy and paste this because it's easier. And this is the thing as well. Like, don't think for a minute that people like me just memorize all these commands. If you're doing this stuff all the time, sure. But like when I worked as a Windows admin, I didn't really use PowerShell to create new users. I just did it through the GUI because it was a lot easier. Like if you're doing it in bulk, by all means use a script, use PowerShell. But just to create a new user, it's much easier to just click a couple of buttons, fill in a few fields in the UI than it is to type all this stuff out, memorize all this. So yeah, if we do account password, there we go. Oh, I copied and pasted it all, didn't it? So we can just paste that in. We'll set the password to be vbscrub123, and we also want to set enabled to true. So that should create as a new account, except we forgot to give it a name again, but there we go. So now we've got this new account. Now we want to add it to that Exchange Windows Permissions group. So we'll do add AD group member, I think it is, yep. Group member, and the group that we want to add it to is that Exchange Windows Permissions group, and the member is vbscrub. Don't know if you can just do the name like that. It seemed to do that fine. Let's just check that that's gone through fine. Scrub, also the properties that we want to get, member of, and that will tell us the groups that they're a member of, and you can see we are in fact a member of that group now. So now, if we log off and log back on as this new user account we've created, we'll be a member of that group, and then we'll have permission to modify the permissions on the root of the domain to give ourselves the DC sync permissions. So to be able to log in remotely with this new account we've created, we need to add them to the remote management users group. So we're going to do the same thing that we did here, but we'll just do remote management users. And that's just like a built-in group that controls who can remotely PowerShell in. So now I can log off as this account, except it looks like someone has just reset the machine because now we can't connect. So we'll wait for that to finish resetting, then we'll have to just go through those steps again, and I will rejoin you guys to the video when we're back at the stage we were at. Right, so now we're back at this same stage we were just at. So we'll log back in with that user account that we just created. So now the credentials that we're going to use are vbscrub, vbscrub123. Okay, so now we're logged in as this account. Now we need to modify the permissions on the root of the domain. You can use some third-party scripts to do this, but to be honest, I prefer to just do it in normal PowerShell. So if we just Google PowerShell grant DC sync rights, or permissions, we eventually find this article which has got a nice bit of PowerShell we can literally just copy and paste. We do need to change the domain name, so let's just change that. Again, normally I'm not for just copying and pasting things blindly, but like I've already explained in the DC sync video, this is just standard PowerShell stuff. It's just getting the root of the domain. So here, http.local, gets the current user account, finds that user account in the domain, finds the SID of that user account by getting user.sid, and this is just the unique ID of one of the permissions that we want, the replicating directory changes all permission. Again, all explained in the DC sync video, so go watch that if this is all meaning absolutely nothing to you. And then, yeah, it's just setting up an access control list entry, and then it does the same thing again for the other permission that we want, and then it applies it to the root of the domain. So we'll set that there to be our domain as well. And now if we just copy and paste this into PowerShell, run it, it fails because I did not import the Active Directory module. So import that. And now we paste it in. Now it runs through and press enter on that last line. Now it should work fine. So now we've got DC sync permissions, we're going to use the secretsdump.py script from Impacket. And I don't know why I happen to run Impacket stuff in command prompt when you could just run it in PowerShell, but whatever. We'll run that. We want to do http.local again. But this time we want to specify our user accounts and their password, so vbscrub123. And then I think for this one you have to actually do at the machine name or the IP address, because in-packet weirdness. You don't have to do that in some of their scripts, you do in others. We'll give it the DC IP address as well, just to make sure it's happy. And then we'll say just DC and TLM hashes. That's all we want to get. So I think that should be all we need. We'll see if I've forgotten something. Okay, so it didn't like our username and password for some reason. What did I get wrong there? Maybe this is one where we don't have to use the machine name there. No, you do have to do that because otherwise it can't do that. We'll try the actual host name instead, but I don't think that makes any difference here. No, it's saying logon failure. Have I just lost my mind and forgotten what I set the password to, even though I just used it a second ago? Let's just exit out of that. Oh, access denied to even exit out of that. Has someone reset the machine again or something? Like, have my credentials just disappeared? I don't understand. Access denied. So something has happened. Let's log back in with the SVC alfresco account. Don't you love it when things go smoothly? Import the Active Directory module again, because I want to see if our account still exists, basically. It does exist, but it's not a member of any groups on us because we didn't do member of. Yeah, so it's still a member of the groups, so why can't we log on? It does seem like someone's reset our password, to be honest. Right, so I've reset the password again. Now let's try again. Yeah, so now it works. So I'm really confused there. All I can think is that because this SVC alfresco account has got permission to set passwords, that somebody reset the password on our account while we were doing this, but that's kind of weird. So now that we've done this part and got the password hashes, I think I'll delete that account that we've got because somebody else might be using it. So we'll do remove AD user VB scrub. Yeah. So that account is gone because again, I don't want to kind of be giving somebody else on the machine a helping hand and getting them further ahead than they should be. They might have just seen that that VB scrub account was a member of those groups and thought, oh, maybe we're supposed to reset the password for that or something. I don't know. It's like I say, it's good to kind of just tidy up as soon as you're done on these machines because then you're not affecting other people. So just to clarify, because I know that was very messy because of those hiccups there, we created the new user account, added them to those two groups, one so that we could remotely PowerShell in, one so that we could modify permissions on the root of the domain. We then ran this PowerShell script here to actually change the permissions on the root of the domain to allow us to do the DC sync attack. Again, all covered in another video. This is the DC sync attack, which allows us to dump the NTLM password hashes for any account in the domain. So from here, we can either do a Kerberos golden ticket attack with this password hash for the KRB TGT account. Again, I have a separate video explaining that in a lot of detail, but for this one, we're just going to use the administrator password hash here. So we'll grab this and we'll use WMI exec from inpacket. Who knows what the syntax of this one is off the top of my head? I can't remember. So we want to just do target command. That's fine. I think you can leave the command out if empty. Yeah, it just does a normal shell. And dash hashes is what we want. So we will do the target, which is going to be, we'll just use the IP address. And then does the target need to be, oh, it wants to be domain / username. Okay, so we'll do http.local/administrator. And then the password. Oh, well, no, sorry, we don't want the password because we're going to do the hashes option. But I think we do need to do the machine name that it's at target name. Yeah, so we'll do at 10.10.10.161. And then the DC IP. I don't know if that's actually required for this one, but we'll do it anyway just to be on the safe side. And then we want hashes, and we'll paste in the administrator's password hash. And now this should connect us and give us an interactive reverse shell that's running as administrator. Now there's plenty of ways that you can use this hash. You don't have to use WMI exec. That's just one way that I know lets you do a pass the hash attack. You could use the evil WinRM tool on Linux if you want to do a remote PowerShell session and pass the hash. You can do pass the hash attacks in lots of different ways. So yeah, this is just one example. But yeah, if we do who am I now from this shell, you'll see that we are actually running as the administrator account. And as such, we can go to their desktop So administrator/desktop, and we'll be able to get the root flag from there. So you can see root.txt. And there we go, that is the root flag. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Again, apologies for not really going into much detail here, but I'm not just going to repeat myself when I've already done other videos explaining these topics. It's also a shame that we had such a headache with the password thing there and a few weird things going on in general, but we got it done. So hopefully there was something interesting in there. And like I say, I'll leave links in the description or in a pinned comment to the 2 videos that explain all of the stuff we did in this one. And don't worry, the next few videos that are going to be on Hack the Box machines will be a lot more kind of in-depth explaining stuff as we go, rather than just saying refer to a different video. But this one just happened to have pretty much nothing else to it other than 2 topics I've already covered. So yeah, I hope you found some of that interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.